Eliza and I recently took the ultimate Southern California food road trip, visiting restaurants, breweries, ice cream shops, and farms from San Diego to the San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles County. You can find these very fun episodes in the This Is Taste feed. And we can't think of a better time to support these restaurants. Thanks to our friends at Visit California for supporting this epic journey. Visit www.visitcalifornia.com to plan the perfect getaway to California, the ultimate playground.
I don't mind what people call my books, whether they call them cookbooks or travel logs or whatever. Most people call them cookbooks. But I wanted to do a sort of three-dimensional journey where people could taste the journey. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put some recipes in a travel log so that when people are reading, you've got the photograph and then you can make the recipe as well. So for me, they're sort of travel logs as recipes.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Caroline Eden is a writer and literary critic. She's the author of many terrific food and travel books, including Samarkand, Black Sea, and Red Sands. She has been awarded both the Art of Eating Prize and the Andre Simon Award, and Red Sands was Book of the Year for the Financial Times, Sunday Times, and The New Yorker. On this episode, we talk about her terrific new book, a memoir titled Cold Kitchen. The book is a real journey through parts of Eastern Europe, the Baltic region, and beyond, and we dive into her travels through Russia, Bulgaria, Georgia, and many other locations that perhaps don't get the time they deserve. Caroline is a brilliant reporter, and this is one of my favorite interviews in recent memory. I had such a great time catching up with her, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Caroline Eden, welcome to This Is Taste. So great to finally meet you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm extremely excited for this conversation because I've just loved your books, Black Sea and Red Sands. I've talked about them on the show. Incredible works of journalism. I have to admit, I've only read probably half of each of them. It's probably because of the format, long conversation, not to be had here. But your memoir, Cold Kitchen, I read in a day. It's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask you a lot of things. I want to ask about your career. I want to hear about many stops along the way in this book, and really dig into countries that I feel as Americans we don't cover enough. They're very undercovered, and you've done such a great job of bringing them to the U.S. audience and others. But The book really does kind of circle around, or it's focused on your kitchen in Edinburgh, and I want to get a sense of this kitchen, this space that is the center of your memoir. Take us to this kitchen.
Thank you. So it's in the new town of Edinburgh, which is it's all Georgian buildings, cobblestone streets, so quite old. And the kitchen is a basement kitchen. So my flat or apartment is the ground floor and the basement. So to get to the kitchen, you go down some flagstone steps, which curve slightly. And then you go in through the door, and it's like this subterranean kitchen. And it's got quite a countryside feel because it's got wood beams on the ceiling. And it's got one single sash window, which is an old-fashioned window. They're very drafty. And that's lovely because you look up and it's a view to the street above. So I can see people's legs and dogs' tails and buggies and things going past while I'm down there in the kitchen.
And Airbnb rollies.
Yes, all of that, especially in the summertime or around the time of Hogmanay when it's the new year. So it's a kind of subterranean, cozy kitchen. It's not a cold kitchen. The title's slightly ironic. We can get into that later if you like. But it's where I try and recreate my travels, where I write my recipes. I've got a little room off of it which has an office in it, which is where I do my writing. So when I'm at home, it's where I spend most of my time. So I wanted it to be a character in the book.
Really is a character, and you talk a lot about the folks who are walking by. I've been to Edinburgh and Hogmanay. Yeah, that was fun. Great city. And I love that you use this kitchen and what's in your pantry, and it's I think what a lot of us, when we write about place, we come back to our home, we feel that sense of home, but we're longing for that travel. And so your shelves are filled with spices, with oils, with vinegars. When you're cooking, Caroline, tell me what's it like to travel to Georgia, to travel to Albania through your home kitchen in Edinburgh?
So for me, it's a case of sort of trying to recreate something. So I say in the book that the kitchen is like a portal, and it's where the world comes in. And it can be something very small. It could be, the first chapter in the book is about Uzbekistan's melons. And of course, I can't get those in the UK, but I can get other melons, perhaps from Spain or other places. And when I'm slicing the melon, it could be just the scent of it that will take me back to that place. And really, this is a memoir about paying attention and how when you pay attention, the kitchen pays back. So it can be anything. It can be, the feel of a peppercorn between your fingers. It can be, the feel of a cinnamon bark. And I do believe in this sort of like multi-sensory world that the kitchen has gotten. Lots has been said about that. But I sort of see it as a way of being here and there at the same time. So it's this sort of transaction between place.
Which really informs your writing. When you're off in the nook at your laptop typing away about your travels, you got your kitchen off to the side, and it's like a transfer of energy from the kitchen to the laptop. In writing about cooking, you have some bars, you have some lines that unlock a lot about what we talk about on the show and write about on Taste, and you're just so intuitive. And I love this line: "A vital ingredient of cookery is hope." What do you mean by that?
Well, it definitely is for me because I'm just a home cook. I learned how to cook through cookbooks by reading, great writers like Diana Henry, for example. And I think you must have hope when you're cooking because things often don't go exactly the way you'd hoped. For all of us, I think, who enjoy cooking at home. And it's similar to travel. There has to be an element of hope to keep you going, even when things might go slightly wrong. So I do think hope is a key ingredient of the cookery process.
Yeah. It's really intuitive, and I think it's like a hope and a prayer sometimes.
Yeah.
First hope, then prayer is like the second ingredient on the list, right?
Maybe some swearing.
Maybe some swearing too. Always, always, always some swearing. So I can talk about every chapter, and really we can dig into each one and be here for hours. But you got to buy the book, people. It's incredible, and you can pick through it or read it in a day, as I have. One memorable section is your 7-day trip across Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railroad for 7 days. Take us there. Take us to what you're eating, what you're seeing, the smell of your cabin after 7 days, and several liters of vodka. You really paint a picture.
I wondered about putting this chapter in, obviously, because now we're dealing with the terrible events in Ukraine. But it was such a memorable journey, maybe the most memorable journey I've ever taken. To be on a train going through Siberia for that length of time was such an insight. We had different guests in our cabin to start with. We had someone who was a referee for ice hockey. We had somebody who was selling bathroom materials. We had, I think, an older lady came on at some point. And then we had Tatiana and Alexei, who were with us for a large stretch of the journey, and they had never left Siberia. So they were as interested in them as we were. It was a mutual thing. And it was Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. So once the train set off, Alexei went to the dining car and he magicked up a bottle of Champagne, which we got stuck into. And then we were sort of jumping off at various stops. And this was February. It was deep winter. Yeah. It was freezing -20 outside. And we would jump onto the train platforms, share cigarettes as a kind of bonding experience, jump back on, and then the vodka started. It's such a cliche, but liters. They had these little thin bottles. And in Russia, if you're on a vodka session, you drink to the end of the bottle.
Yeah.
So we did. And it was just a kind of wild 24 hours because the time zones, you're always on Moscow time when you're on the train.
Yeah.
It's so disorientating. So I sort of found I'd be going to the dining car and sort of having a bowl of kasha, like the oats, the sort of groats with a sort of slick of butter on the top and maybe a beer at sort of 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Everything became very strange, but it was such a fascinating journey to meet all these ordinary Russians because they don't use the train as sort of an experience. It's a commuter train that people use to cover vast distances. And it was amazing. When we got to Vladivostok, it took us 9 hours to fly
It's
back to
incredible.
Moscow, which for me, being from a small country, like the UK, that is amazing, the distance.
Yeah, you travel. It's 9 hours back on the plane. That is incredible. 7 days, and I mean, traveling in February. That's a choice. Most Americans would take that trip in the summertime. But why'd you do it then?
Because it's so beautiful. Siberia in the winter, all the little houses are covered. I thought they always reminded me of Christmas puddings. You'd look out and you'd see a wooden house and it would have this sort of snow cap on the top, and the dachas and the dogs on the platforms and women wearing 3-inch heels in the snow.
Yeah.
Just amazing. We did stop. We broke the journey for a night or two in Irkutsk, which is quite near some lakes and forests.
Yeah, it sounded like that was maybe a little bit of a dud.
Yeah, well, I think when you're on the train, you want to be on the train.
Yeah.
Because you're mentally on the train. So really it's just a case of getting back on and getting on with it. And everything fascinated me.
Well, I say dud because I think the way you write is you aren't ever trying to make this journey anything but accurate. And I think you write, you're not up or down on places. You're just writing what's there.
I do try and remain honest as a sort of journalistic integrity.
Yeah.
I think that's important to not glamorize and not idealize, or certainly to be respectful always, but to tell the truth.
Tell the truth. And in travel writing, it's anything but. And this industry is built on superlatives, and this is why it's fantastic. I love it. So it seems that the writing of Carla Grisman and her book, Dinner of Herbs, Village Life in Turkey in the 1960s, you give it a lot of lines, and you really pay homage to this writer that is kind of a footnote in history, at least to me. Talk about this writer and how much of an influence she is on your work.
Remarkable book. I'm very, very happy that since Cold Kitchen came out, new readers have been finding Carla Grisman's work. She is an American. She was working at the Jerusalem Post as a journalist, and then on a whim, almost it seemed, she stayed with a family in Anatolia in Turkey for a long time, several months. Lived with this family, didn't speak much Turkish, certainly wasn't a Muslim, was a single woman, about 40-ish. But, nobody was suspicious of her. She just sort of moves in and she describes these wonderful meal times and the way that people live with such accuracy and such empathy. She was such a sort of sensuous writer, was always describing the food and how the women were sitting and how the men were smoking and what things smelt like and tasted like and looked like. And I just love her. And Eland, who are a publisher in the UK, have reissued her book. And I had to write about her because in all of my books, I try to include 1 or 2 or 3 writers who are good on the region, who I feel have sort of dropped off, and try and reintroduce them. And Carla was somebody I wanted to write about in the chapter where I write about how herbs are such a central thing in the Caucasus and in Turkey once springtime comes.
Yeah, you really weave in the history of literature into your writing, and clearly you spent 7 years as a bookseller. So clearly you're giving Iraq still in your own work.
I can't help it.
No, I love that. It's a terrific part about your work. And let's actually take a break from Cold Kitchen and talk about Black Sea and Red Sands. How do these 2 books, how are they informed by Carla's Grisman's techniques? How do you follow this style? Because you like Carla Grisman dropped into these countries. Seemingly you were accepted right away, and you reported and really pick up these 2 books to get a sense of cultures in these places.
So those 2 books, the third one is coming out in April.
What's it called?
I'm not allowed to say yet.
You're not allowed to say it is a 2 word?
It's 2 words and it's a colour. It's something I very pretentiously call this my colour trilogy.
It's not a pretentious.
So we've got Black
fucking
Sea.
Amazing. It's fucking amazing. These books, they're also beautiful books. The packages are incredible.
The design is very good.
Yeah.
So Black Sea, Red Sands, and the final one, and it's sort of 10 years of work. It's all the same region. It's the only region that I write about. It's vast, but Eastern Europe to Central Asia. And Black Sea, I got the idea. I'd published a book with a friend previously called Samarkand. That was my first ever book.
Yep.
That was in 2016. But for me, I wanted to do a travel log with recipes. I don't mind what people call my books, whether they call them cookbooks or travel logs or whatever. Most people call them cookbooks. But I wanted to do a sort of 3-dimensional journey where people could taste the journey. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put some recipes in a travel log so that when people are reading, you've got the photograph and then you can make the recipe as well. So for me, there's sort of travel logs as recipes. And Black Sea, I got the idea because I'd spent time in Odessa in Ukraine, Istanbul, which is not on the Black Sea, but is sort of satisfyingly close, and a city full of people from the Black Sea, and then going up to Trabzon, which is an ancient city in northeastern Turkey. I stopped short of the Caucasus, which is maybe a hint. And I just wanted to talk about how the different cultures have come across that sea and how things change when you start to cross borders. I'm always very interested in what changes, what stays the same, tales of migration, and speaking to people and finding out stories about where people have come from and what they're holding on to in terms of recipes.
Yeah, they're terrific works, and you got to tell me off mic what the third one is. We'll have you back and talk about it. But speaking of recipes and cooking ingredients, I could not help but notice that sea buckthorn comes up many times in your writing, and it led to an observation that you made. Like, sea buckthorn is clearly this incredible product, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that. But I had it in Copenhagen, and this is an ingredient that you see in Northern Europe a lot, and it kind of got you talking and writing about, like, the cuisine of Northern Europe has been on the radars of the Michelin Guide and World's 50 Best for a long time, but places like Albania, Latvia, they're not getting the attention, even though sea buckthorn is from there. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I must say, first of all, I'm very lucky that I have a neighbour in Edinburgh 3 doors down who forages the Scottish coastline for sea buckthorn.
Okay.
But before I even knew her, I'd been drinking a lot of sea buckthorn in tea in Central Asia, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Poland, and in the Baltics. It's ordinary. People use what they have access to. It goes into teas and jam. The first time I ever had it was in Estonia, and it was in a jam, and it was far too sweet. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice one day to taste it, in a sort of more natural format? And it's a wonderful ingredient. It's full of vitamin C, but it's not something we really know very much about in the UK. It grows in certain parts of the coastline, but it's not. Still, most people don't know about it. We don't use it as much as we should. It's very, very good for you. Very sharp, so often needs to be sweetened.
And an incredible color.
Beautiful color. So I have a cocktail recipe in Red Sands, my book on Central Asia, which is called a Caspian Anchor, and it's with vodka and sea buckthorn, and you do a simple syrup to make it a bit sweeter, and that's very nice.
Yeah, yellow. It's like a shitty yellow that you can't even describe.
It's a very sharp orange.
Orange, I guess.
Orange color.
Yeah, it's like a yellow orange.
But a yellowy orange.
Yellowy
right, like
orange.
Sunshine.
Sunshine, there you go.
Yeah, sunshine color.
It's a beautiful color. Back to my other question about Northern Europe and kind of the way that the cuisine there has been championed around the world. But many of the countries you write about have restaurant cultures, have fine dining, but they just don't get the press. Can you square that at all?
I mean, it depends where we're talking about, I suppose. Like Russian cuisine, I think, does have its fancy restaurants in London, and I'm sure here in New York as well. The Baltics has been very overlooked until more recently. And I think that's a shame because I think it's quite similar in some ways, like a lot of use of herbs, of fish, very seasonal, a lot of pickling, those sorts of ingredients. But then you've got Central Asia, which is sort of my, the region I've written about the most probably over the years. That has only had a fine dining scene of any description in cities like Almaty very recently. It's people tend to eat at home or they would eat in cafes. And it's only now really they're starting to get more of a fine dining experience. It's quite different.
But the restaurants that go back generations though are good, are high quality. It's just like there's like we're playing catch up a little bit.
I think there's just an ignorance, and that was the reason I did Samarkand, my first ever book, because I was frustrated that in guidebooks people were very rude about the food in Central Asia, and I was staying with a lot of families, and of course when you stay in a homestay and you eat what people are serving their families, of course it's tasty, and the ingredients are there. The markets are abundance of wonderful ingredients. People are very careful on how they cook, and in a way, you've sort of got to get into the Soviet legacy and how that sort of squashed a lot of traditional food traditions in the Baltics and Central Asia and Eastern Europe. And so that's a sort of resurgence after that, after the fall in 1991.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely write about the tomatoes in
Hmm.
the coolest way. Tomatoes there, but we don't need to talk about tomatoes. But I mean, like read the book and read Caroline's lines about tomatoes. But while reading the book, I'm making like mental notes, like where do I want to go first? And I'm like, it's changing throughout the book, and I'm like thinking I need to go to Georgia, I need to go to, Estonia. But like halfway through, I'm like, I got it. And I want to hear about this because I feel like the way you write about Riga, Latvia is incredible. The city that you talk about, the architecture, the cuisine, the walkability of it. I just want to hear a little bit. And for our listeners, Latvia, wow.
Mm. It's a very beautiful country, small country. Obviously, one of the three Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. It's a wonderful city. I've spent quite a lot of winters there, going to the cafes, cycling down to Yermala, which is on the coast. It's a beautiful cycle ride, about half an hour when it's warm. And it's not a big city. It's small, very, very cozy. Incredible Art Nouveau architecture, which blows people away because people don't realise that the amount of it that's there is absolutely stunningly beautiful. Incredibly cold in the winter, so thick snow. But you sort of, hole up in a nice cafe there with a book and on a park, and there's a silence there. I'm from Edinburgh. It's not a huge city, but
Yeah.
if you were to escape there from, say, New York or London, it's just quiet and calm, and it's got an incredible market. The central market there is one of the best markets I've ever been to. Huge.
High praise.
Amazing. In these aircraft hangars, you walk in and there's people there with the pickles that they've pickled themselves in buckets, which is fairly typical in that part of the world, but it's just ginormous. And there are bakers there from Uzbekistan. There's the Registan Bakery. So you've kind of got that. We don't talk about we don't use the term, former Soviet Union so much anymore. We need to move away from that. But the food legacy of that giant group of countries does still exist. So you can get their Uzbek bread and cheburek, which is a Tatar thing.
Yeah.
And, you've got all those different combinations coming in. And then just everything from the natural larder, birch water and wonderful fermented things and cheeses. And it's just really interesting.
Yeah, your lines about the Regan pickle lady. Great lines there.
And the sprats. I mean, if you like those sort of strong, bold flavors, which I do, you have sprats on rye with sort of cottage cheese for breakfast. It's incredibly healthy.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about what are the Latvian people like, and what would it be like for somebody to book a flight from New York to Latvia and spend some time in Riga? Like, is it? I mean, is there English there? I'm really just ignorant about the area, and I think some of our listeners may be interested in hearing about it.
I mean, the Latvians are quite, I'd say they're quite a modest, quite quiet people. The young people all speak English mainly, incredibly friendly. Some very good bars. They have a good beer culture there. So you've got these sort of nice sort of underground dive bars where you can get, good IPAs and that sort of thing, which I like. But then also amazing things like Quince lemonade I had when I was last there. I wasn't drinking, and they had in this cool bar Quince lemonade, which was absolutely delicious. It's just a kind of curious place. I like it. I like it for it sort of feels very much on its own.
Yeah.
It's part of the Baltic trio, but it has this very strong identity, Latvia, and it also has a large number of Russian speakers still, about a third. So that's also quite interesting with everything that's going on at the moment. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And you have a recipe for a Latvian black pudding in the book too. And I am like, talk us through that a little bit, because it seems pretty simple, but it's using beer. It's a unique technique.
Yeah, it's a bread pudding. So it's a layered bread pudding. I had it in a restaurant called Milda, which in the book I say it's one of those rare restaurants because it's touristy, but it's also very, very good. So I remember I had a fish main course, and then I said, what should I have as dessert? And he said, you should have this layered bread pudding. And they soak very dark bread in beer, not brandy, which is what I thought it was, but it's a very dark beer, and then it's sort of layered with sort of whipped thick cream and then fresh berries.
It's like a trifle.
Yes.
Kind of, because it's
very
not
much.
it's a chilled pudding. I said black pudding, I meant bread pudding, obviously. It's like layered trifle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks exactly like that. So it's very nice to serve it in a glass ramekin where you can see the different layers. Or you could even serve it. My friend Zach, who's a very good Polish food writer, she suggests she's got a recipe in her book on the Baltics, and she does it in a giant trifle, glass dish. So
That's what I'm
you could
thinking.
serve it and put it in the center of the table as well.
I'm gonna make it. It's
Yeah.
terrific. It's your recipe writing is fantastic. It's really really pared down and simplified in a cool way. Major credit. I have to ask you about mineral water because I feel like this plays a little bit of a cameo and a bit of a micro theme on our show. We've written about it. Jordan Michelman, great writer, he's been kind of championing it in the States for a long time. Caroline, you have probably more mineral water drinking experience than most guests. So talk about the way water and bottles of water play a role in this part of the world.
So I think the Caucasus, as far as my mineral water drinking goes, is the top league there. So say you're in Georgia or Armenia. In Armenia, it's Jermuk. And Jermuk has the logo of a deer on it. It's very, very bubbly, slightly salty, very, very, very delicious. There was a problem in the US a while ago because there were slightly high levels of, I think it was arsenic.
Never a great thing.
No.
Not great for branding in the States when you have arsenic.
Bit worried about that.
Yeah.
And the big Armenian communities in LA said, this is absolutely fine. We've been drinking it for years. And there's a hoo-ha and then it's back for sale again.
Yeah.
In Georgia, it's Borjomi. That was controversial because it had links to some Russian investment. But Georgia has many different mineral waters, and you can see the hot springs if you go up towards Kazbegi and around there and go walking. You can see the mineral water at source. It's delicious. It's just interesting to try all the different ones. They're all slightly similar, slightly different. Some are more bubbly and more fizzy than others. Some are slightly more salty than others. But they feel good for you somehow. Like if you've got a hangover, I think you want a very bubbly, slightly salty mineral water.
Completely agree.
And it sorts you out. It's like a seltzer.
It is, but it has like this body to it. And sometimes it has this like texture and velvety nature to it.
Yeah.
Then it has minerality and the sparkling, so many elements, but like we just don't think about it here in the States.
No, I mean, Russians, Ukrainians, people from the Caucasus, they all get mineral water, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like served at restaurants like wine and beer, right? There's different labels available.
But they do I'm just thinking Turkey too.
Yeah.
Ulugdag, it's a mountain near Bursa. That water is also very delicious. I just think we're missing a trick slightly in the UK. We have our mineral waters, but they don't have the same body somehow.
They definitely don't have the body. They've been like strained and polished and they're just not there. But you can find them in markets. That's the thing. If you find the right market, they import them here. You've mentioned the Baltic trio, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and you write confidently and colorfully about road tripping through these countries. And how does that work? Like for an American, like can we rent a car and just drive around?
Yeah. We rented a car at the airport in Riga. And we drove up to Pärnu in Estonia and came back down and then I did a coastal trip initially. That was my first ever trip to the Baltics. It's quite a short trip. It was just a week. So didn't have very long. We concentrated on the coast. It's really easy. It's very flat.
Yeah.
So we're used to driving in the Scottish Highlands. It's, you'd be fine.
Let's get to some logistics. I mean, does Google Maps work?
Yep.
Get like an automatic at the rental spot, or do you have to drive stick? I'm just like saying this as like somebody who wants to go there.
Goodness, I think it was probably a stick.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All good. We can drive stick.
And I can't remember what side of
that. When you travel a lot and you don't know the side of that is amazing.
I have to just think. Yeah.
Wait, so it switches throughout?
No. I'm just thinking because Japan and the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
New Zealand.
But I have to think now about the Baltics. Which side?
Yeah, I mean, listen, write in if you can. I mean, I'm sure you can Google it, but I just think this idea of road tripping it feels like an adventure.
I don't do it very often, to be honest. I mean, I'm much more often on a train, or in a taxi with someone else.
Let's talk a little bit about your walking, and you write about walking in Scotland, which it seems you're very committed to it. And my question is how does walking play into your writing? Do they kind of work together in some way? And what's the deep pleasure of walking? I think we sometimes want to walk more, or hike, we call it sometimes here in the States, but we don't.
Mm. Because I live in Edinburgh, I'm very lucky. I've got quite easy access to big hills. Some of it's accessible on public transport, even.
Wow.
And I think it's just wonderful to go outside and to walk. And the lovely thing about walking in Scotland is if you're in the Cairngorms at the right time of year, you won't pass another human being.
Yeah.
And in our frenetic, difficult world that we live in, that's very nice sometimes to be able to just really go out and go into the wilds and in the winter see mountain hares, see an eagle, cross a small river, come back again. I've walked in many places in the countries that I write about. Scotland is my favourite place to walk in the world. It's just the right level of adventure. So, there are no bears. No one's got a gun. It's not, it's fairly safe, but you've got to be able to navigate and sort of do your safety element of having, enough food and water and being able to follow a map or at least a Ordnance Survey
Yeah.
app to get around safely. But it's wonderful. I think it's head clearing. I think you get good ideas when you walk. Again, it's a bit like cooking and traveling. You set out with some hope and you never quite know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
So it's kind of exciting adventure and can be done in a day.
Your ethic really echoes, friend of the show, Craig Maude in Japan. He's another travel writer who writes about walking. And there's something about travel writing and walking that unlocks this new universe when you don't have to rely on public transport and you can just walk from A to B. You write beautifully about picnicking and packing food, and I love that section. It's like one of my favorites, and please pick up the book and read it. It's just like terrific. Just I would say it's your version of an explainer. It's like very literary, but you give us some great tips. And I have to say, the Fisherman's Friends lozenges somehow popped into as like a must pack. You're like talking about these beautiful produce and sandwiches, but then you have this very specific item, and I'm like, why is this the must pack for hiking?
Do you have them here in the US?
I don't know what they are.
No, okay, I love that.
I don't know what they are.
So they are an English thing. They were created by a fisherman many, many years ago. They've become very popular in China, apparently. They are menthol lozenges, but they're very hard, brown, flat. They look like pebbles, very small. They are very much an acquired taste.
Lovely.
I really like them because they wake you up, they freshen you up. They're kind of like a quick hit of energy because they're strong, and I love menthol. But they're good to travel with because the reaction. So I took some on the Trans-Siberian, I remember. That and some sloe gin.
Oh, yeah.
The Russians didn't like either of these things.
You had a little like flask of sloe gin, yeah?
Yeah,
Oh,
have a
great.
little thing of sloe gin. They didn't like it because I think unless you know what it is, it's quite an unusual thing. So it's always quite an interesting thing to give one to somebody to see what the reaction is like. But also they last forever. I mean, they're indestructible. You can have them in your pocket for months and they'd be fine.
Fisherman's Friends lozenges. I'm probably get them on Amazon. I pick them up somewhere in the States. Got to pick it up. All right, a broad question, but I think an important question. In your travels as a reporter and as an author, how do you pick a hotel or pick a guest house or pick an Airbnb wherever you are? Because it seems like you unlock some really interesting spaces and you clearly have some real intel to share about how to pick.
I think it's tricky. I like to stay in smaller places. But as I get older, I'm quite fussy about noise. So you kind of have to balance that. And mid-range business hotels have obviously got the soundproofing, which is very tempting, but you're not going to get the character then. You're not going to get the interesting breakfast interactions. So I think small, mid-range hotels are best. If they're family run, even better. I'm very keen on safety. So as a solo woman, I wouldn't go for a ground floor. You have all these, I think everybody has these sort of particular things they look for when they travel that they want. But I like somewhere that's not necessarily where everyone else is staying. So if everyone's staying on the right bank, I'd probably choose the left bank. I'm just thinking of Tbilisi. I would choose the other side. That everyone
It's great advice when you just got to get away from
away from where everyone else is going.
Yeah.
It will be fine, especially in the age now where you've got, driver apps and things. You're never going to be stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think stay somewhere a bit different. Stay for as long as possible. I don't like rushing through. Obviously, this is a privilege. You have to have time, but it's nice to sit somewhere for a while because then stories will just present themselves to you.
Yeah, and we travel like journalists. I think the best travelers think about stories. I mean, their experiences is what we want.
Yeah.
We write about it like for our jobs, but as a traveler, you just want stories.
I think more and more nowadays, everybody's got a slightly more journalistic outlook. You've got these sort of Airbnb experiences and things. And I think Airbnb's okay. I mean, I'm living in Edinburgh. It's a city which has been impacted by mass tourism,
Yeah.
so I'm not a huge fan, but it can work sometimes if you're somewhere for a while and you might get to know your host, which can be
Yeah.
interesting as well, especially in countries that haven't got a ginormous tourism industry going on. That can also be a good thing sometimes.
No spoilers, but at the end of the book, you witness a coup. And I think that the room, the hotel, I'm sure, or guest house you stayed in is like a character.
Mm.
And you haven't run in with a dog. It's so great.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about it because honestly, listener, pick up this book, get to that last section. It's so worth it. This is a journey, this book, and it's hard to do. So definitely pick that up. I want to ask you about Krakow because it's a place. As a Jewish American, I've never been to Poland. I have family from Galicia, so I had liked to go there one day. And you studied Jewish literature in college. You have a master's degree, which I think is you have a great perspective for this question, which is how do you visit Poland as a Jew? I know you're not Jewish, but you've studied. And how do you square, the camps that are nearby, the atrocities? I've avoided it personally. I'm just being honest here, being vulnerable. I think I've avoided it for that reason. But you have great experience. You write very beautifully about Krakow, and you make me want to go.
It's so difficult. I think the Poles are good at remembering. The Museum of Polish Jewry in Warsaw is fantastic. You can spend 2 days in there. There are other very good museums dedicated to Jewish life in Poland. There are very good Jewish restaurants that you can go to. I was in Łódź recently. Great Jewish restaurant. Had some very interesting food there. So I think they're very good at remembering. But it is upsetting, and I chose not to go to Auschwitz because I just can't. I don't think I can stomach the idea. And in the book, I write about seeing this postcard in a museum. And perhaps I won't go into it now, but it turned my stomach. It's the dining room of the SS, and it's very, very complicated to be in Poland. Even if I'm not Jewish, but I have an interest in Jewish history, and so you kind of have to go. But then it wasn't that long ago, and I think it's incredibly moving, and you get big groups of young people from the States and from Europe going, and Israel going to visit where their relatives were from. And I think that it's a case of just remembering and hoping that history is not going to repeat itself, which...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a tricky topic to cover on a 5-minute section of a podcast, but that postcard really hit me, the way you wrote about this postcard and the way this dining room in Auschwitz is presented on a postcard that was circulated prominently during the war.
It's that normalization where, the SS and the Nazis were having children, going to balls, sitting in nice dining rooms. And it's this sort of really tricky thing that it just makes you question humanity so much. And I think I don't need to go to Auschwitz to remember. But you just must never forget.
Yeah. You write boldly about a Ferris wheel ride in Armenia that plays out kind of like, I would say, the beginning of a horror movie. Thankfully, it's not the end of a horror movie, but tell me about that. And how do you, at the end of this Ferris wheel ride, you pull out an Ararat Slim and you smoke it and you're alive?
Well, I'm an idiot. I'm scared of heights. And I got on this old Soviet era Ferris wheel.
Just because it's just
because
there.
I'd had a nice morning walking around the historic centre of Gyumri, which is kind of Armenia's second city, very close to the Turkish border. And I thought, it's a nice park, Ferris wheel, I'll get a good view of the city. So I got my token, got on, and the guy literally cranked it up to get it going. And I was the only person on it. And there was a man far below who was filming me with his mobile phone.
Wow. Like this woman dared.
Yeah, and I had this horrible...
ride it.
I think I write in the book that my eyelids started to vibrate with fear because I had to shut them at one point. I was so high up and everything went silent. And when I came back down, I'm not a smoker, but I really like the Ararat Slim cigarettes. Yeah. And I did have a packet, so I had one. And I was annoyed because it was morning and it wasn't the time to be having a delicious Armenian brandy. I had to wait till later. But I got off of this thing, sweating and shaking, thinking, what was I thinking? Why?
Wow.
A friend of mine has been on it since, and he said it was fine. But
I love the portrait that you paint. It seems like the kind of people you meet, the experiences you have that pepper your writing. And let's stick with Armenia. It's a country with a great, history in America, lots of immigration here, particularly in Los Angeles. But I feel it's a place that people maybe don't visit as much from the States, unless you have family there, of course. What's the draw to Armenia?
I love it so much. It's such a wonderful country to travel around. The food's incredible. It has, so with everything that's been happening in Syria and Lebanon, a lot of Armenians from those countries have returned to Armenia. So are opening up Middle Eastern style restaurants, which are very, very good with an Armenian sort of twist, perhaps. The wine is excellent. Georgia gets all the love for the wine, rightly so. The wine in Georgia is amazing, but Armenia also has very good wine. The trekking's incredible. The Armenian people are very, very charming. The culture's fascinating. Incredible artists. I mean, we probably know about Sergei Parajanov, the film director, but also smaller artists you've never heard of. Sarian has got this wonderful house museum in Yerevan. Yerevan's a very walkable city. Fascinating to go to. It's very, very hot in the summer. I was there during the summer, and for me it was too hot, but I think more people should go to Armenia, absolutely, like the same for Poland. These are two countries which I think offer so much to visitors, which still don't have a huge tourism industry. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, because Georgia is getting very popular, for example.
Yeah, Tbilisi is just on every radar. It's built up. I feel that, there's more cigarette smoking there in the world than anywhere else.
Yes, big smoking. Same in Armenia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, a lot of smoking.
A national sport, yeah.
Wonderful atmosphere to be found in Yerevan, in the capital city. It's a really, really interesting place to be.
I mean, do you feel safe in Armenia?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Very, very, very safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you negotiate that term safety? I mean, I feel like it's a lot of us have never heard of these countries outside of war and conflict because that's how we report them in the States. But you write very honestly. There are some dangerous moments in this book, but typically it seems you don't find danger and you're very open about your travels.
Yeah, I mean, I think the countries that I tend to travel in are incredibly safe. So Uzbekistan, for example, is still effectively a police state. The crime rate is incredibly low. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I get more nervous coming to the States. This is only my fourth time ever coming here. And, you've got to get in. The border itself is quite nerve-wracking at the airport. There's a lot of things you have to think about. I return to countries quite a lot. And I think once you've been somewhere once or twice, your confidence gets greater and you feel more comfortable being somewhere. So, I've been to Poland 4 or 5 times. I've been to Uzbekistan 4 or 5 times. I go back and I often spend quite long periods of time in places. So for my Red Sands book, for example, I was in Central Asia for 6 months. I did 3 months in the spring, 3 months in the autumn. And you get used to things. For me, it's always the road travel that makes me the most nervous because the driving is quite erratic and that makes me sweat.
Of course.
But apart from that, I think everywhere's the same. People are the same. Everybody used to use common sense.
Just drive in New Jersey. It's pretty crazy too. Just saying.
Can imagine.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the idea of safety in the United States because with our gun situation, it's not safe. It just isn't. So
it is how it looks from the outside. But it's wonderful to be here, and I'm a huge.
No, you're not saying that. I'm not saying it, but I think it's just about giving parity to these countries that, again, are covered aggressively when there's conflict in it, like Kyrgyzstan, for example. Right? I mean, that's a country that seemingly you can visit and is relatively safe, but we only hear about conflict there.
I mean, it's a bit like with Ukraine, unfortunately. At the moment, it's a great tragedy, obviously, the ongoing atrocious war that Russia has created in that country. I was there in last February, when the war was happening. I went back to Odessa. And that was not safe, obviously, but I felt I wanted to go back and see a few people that I knew there and to do some reporting, and I'm glad that I went.
Let's close there. I think we need to talk about Ukraine. I think it's a place that you have extensive experience covering, and your heart is there in many ways in this book. You write about the invasion and the atrocities with the invasion of Ukraine, and I'd like to hear what's going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't really say I know extensively. I visited Odessa quite a few times.
Okay.
Odessa's the city that I know the most, the best. And then I was in Lviv very shortly before the full-scale invasion happened. I think that the energy is running low on both sides, but I feel for Ukraine immensely. I absolutely understand why they're not willing to cede land. It's terrible. I mean, there's no good outcome because already so many people have died, and Ukraine has lost so much. Um, I just hope that I don't know what's going to happen with the new administration here, but I'm just praying for this not to continue for much longer, for more lives to be lost.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. And yeah, I'd like to hear about Lviv. I think it's a part of Ukraine that you write about, and it's on the Polish border, so it's relatively safer and possibly less destroyed in the war, but still very much part of war. And I just really loved the writing about Lviv and this Jewish writer that you really give a beautiful tribute to. Cinnamon Chops. Tell me about this book.
Yeah, so Bruno Schulz was a wonderful writer who the only good thing to have come out of this atrocious war is that Ukrainian culture is becoming better known as a result. Because when I first went to Odessa, people really didn't know very much about the city, and now at least everyone's heard about it and they know that there was wonderful culture there. And Lviv, Bruno Schulz, there isn't a single memorial or plaque to this wonderful writer, but there will be. And somebody, it was actually the poet Ilya Kaminsky, tweeted a while ago that somebody has put a bench with one of his paintings on it to remember this writer who had really been forgotten. Bruno Schulz wrote these wonderful, fantastical sort of books about life, how he imagined them. He lived in this tiny Jewish shtetl not far from Lviv, and Cinnamon Shops is all about an imaginary shop full of fantastic things. He's such an incredible writer. So I just mention him in the book too as a way of sort of, giving thanks and hoping that he'll become better known, not through my book, but because now Ukrainian culture, people have their eyes on it more, which can only be a good thing.
Well, definitely through your book, I'll say. And I think a part of reading this memoir is reading about your story, but uncovering literature through the history of these countries that maybe some readers are less familiar with. And you've got, great footnotes and bibliography, so you can pick up the books. And you're not going to tell me what your next book is? Just a little hint.
I don't know if I'm allowed.
All right, a little. Okay, we don't need to talk about the color or the name. We don't need to talk about the countries.
There's some walking involved.
Okay. You've given me a little bit. Okay, there's walking involved. And it's out in April of this year, 25?
Yes.
Wow, well.
In the US and the UK. Yeah.
It's not announced yet?
Well, I have to do the promo for this book, you see, because we had such a big gap.
I see. Okay.
This book is coming out this week here in the US. So once this is done, then we'll move on to that.
Well, please, are you going to come back?
I hope so. I'd like to.
You're absolutely welcome back anytime. I'm such a fan of your work. For real, it's truly amazing to meet you. And this is Taste We Ask Guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Yes.
The best fruit.
Uzbek melons.
You write beautifully about it. There's lots of lines. Can you get in the States, you think?
Possibly. You can in Germany. You can in Turkey. You've got a big Uzbek community here, so I imagine you might. We can't in the UK.
What makes these melons special?
They have all these fantastical names for them, like, golden eyebrow, wolf's ear, like amazing names. Those are both incorrect, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And they're just very, very sweet, very sort of ripened over a long period. Very, very good.
The worst vegetable?
Okra, which I hate myself for saying, but I just can't cook it well. It's more of a fault with me.
Challenging one. It's
yes.
Challenging, yeah, very much so. The best dessert?
Milk pudding.
Oh. Explain.
So you get those very basic milk puddings that are just sort of flavored with some cardamom and they're sort of jelly-like.
Of course.
Yeah, I like anything like that. Sort of basic milk pudding with some rose water or cardamom or sort of flavored.
I mean, it's kind of in the panna cotta realm, perhaps.
Yeah,
maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milk pudding.
Milk pudding.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Clean, precise, simple. Got it. Your favorite city outside Scotland to visit for food?
Istanbul. It's the world's greatest kitchen.
Love it. I mean, right now it seems like an interesting time to visit Istanbul.
Yeah, it's always a good time.
There you go. Maybe it's always a good time. Yeah. I feel like maybe you're gonna write about it again. Okay, I'm gonna lay off that. I'm gonna lay off the next book thing. All right. Restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead.
Yes, Great Queen Street in Covent Garden in London. It was a great, bit like St John. It was riding that sort of wave, and it closed. I used to go there a lot and eat at the bar. Really
Right.
good British sort of restaurant. Yeah, much missed.
Yeah. Do you still miss living in London?
Yep,
Yeah, but you probably make it there a bit.
I go there a lot. My dad's just outside, so I love London. I'm a big fan of London, and yeah, I like to visit.
Couple more. Your favorite cookbook of all time.
It would be a Diana Henry cookbook because I love Diana's writing and her recipes. It would probably be her book Simple.
Mm-hmm. Classic book. Do you have a favorite recent cookbook discovery? Past couple years.
I love Olia Hercules' work and her book Summer Kitchens, which came out not long ago, which really is an important book because it mapped Ukrainian cooking before the full-scale invasion. So it's kind of a time capsule, that book. I think that's very valuable.
Very cool. Last one, your favorite sandwich.
Ooh, cheese and pickle. But that's Branston pickle, the English thing.
Okay, cheese and pickle means a lot of things.
Yeah, cheddar
Okay.
cheese with Branston pickle, white crusty bread.
Toasted?
No,
Okay, so this is like a cold.
because it'll go on the hill. You put it in some cling film and take it up the hill. So cheese and pickle sandwich.
This is the hill sandwiches that you're right about.
Could be a good one, yeah.
Could be a good hill walking sandwich. Caroline Eden, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you very much for having me.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.